There's also, I have noticed from talking to younger people, a recognition that that democracy just kind of isn't working, or our conception of democracy. I don't meet really anybody who uses the term democracy non-ironically.
Yes.
Tucker Carlson recently pinpointed the most insane flaw in U.S. democracy, and how our system was set up has been perverted in many ways by the way in which politics play out in terms of policy today. This is in the context of a conversation with Michael Knowles, so let's get his take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
I always imagine that there's a direct line between the quality of the leadership and the quality of the people.
Of course. This is why I can't
But that's not always true. So as America becomes more prosperous, the people become weaker and sillier.
Yes.
I mean, that's how I grew up. I grew up in the, richest country in history, but there was a steady decline in the quality of thinking, certainly, and of behavior.
And of leadership.
Yeah.
I mean, is it H.G. Wells who said democracy is the theory that, was it? No, I don't know. Who was it? I forget who it was. Who said democracy is the theory that the common people know what they want and deserve to get it good and hard? This is why I can't get into, I have many... I love the populist movement. I was so into the rise of Trump. I remain into the rise of Trump.
Yes.
I think this has been the healthiest political awakening in my lifetime. I think I'm all about it. But I can't throw too many stones merely at the leadership class, because one, the civil authority is there for our own good. It's in that way appointed by God, in a certain sense. And also, we kind of get the government that we deserve. And if you don't,
yeah, I don't believe that civil government is appointed by God. That seems foolhardy. And by that explanation, do you mean all governments, just the American government? Does God differentiate between the governments? And people will often point back to, say Romans 12 if you're a Christian, but it doesn't say be subject to the civil governments. It says be subject to the lawful authorities. And if you trace the Greek root of that, they're talking about the religious leaders. And this is just a foolhardy approach to government to believe that all governments are appointed by God. Does that mean that he appointed the Khmer Rouge or Stalin's Russia or Mao Zedong or Hitler? It doesn't make sense to me.
Know anything about your country and you don't care about your civic life and you're just going to be greedy. You're either going to, on the left side of things, just indulge in weird social stuff that's purely selfish. And on the right side of things, you engage in economic selfishness and no one cares about the common good and no one cares about the body politic. Then
that's kind of where we are right there.
Yes. And you're going to get crappy leadership a lot of the time.
And leadership doesn't always reflect the will of the people. If that was true, we wouldn't have endless aid to Israel and Ukraine and focus outwardly so much. You wouldn't have the TARP bailouts. Those things weren't even popular with the populace. So, the way that the politics play out has been in contradiction to actually the interests of Americans. So it's not correct to say that government is a reflection of us. Certainly not so. Government lags behind the culture. And I think Breitbart was right when he says that politics is downstream from culture. We don't always get the results that we want. It's all controlled by a closely knit oligarchy. That's the uniparty that wants debt and inflation and wars and surveillance and the taxation apparatus that we live with, regardless of the party.
Sometimes you get a second chance.
So it's just like greed and lust. Those are your choices.
Yes, and this is classic political philosophy going all.
The choices are actually the party of stupid and the party of evil, and sometimes the party of stupid and party of evil collaborate to do both stupid and evil things. That's paraphrasing a quote by my good friend Tom Woods, but I think that's true.
The way back, which is that greed, avarice, is the beginning of evils in the city. And it's natural, and you have to try.
Worship of money is the root of all evil.
Yes, that's right.
There's also, I have noticed from talking to younger people, a recognition that that democracy just kind of isn't working, or our conception of democracy. I don't meet really anybody who uses the term democracy non-ironically.
Yes.
Do you?
Well, when you go back to the framers of our Constitution, you'll recognize that they use the phrase democracy in a derisive way and as a warning of impending peril, because even the notion that our country is a liberal democracy, that is a self-conception that came up in the 20th century. It started a little bit in the 30s. It really took off after the World War, and then it reaches its peak in the 80s. That's when it gets escape velocity. we're not a liberal democracy. We have a democratic element, a healthy democratic element to our country.
I don't think it's that healthy, and he's right. The notion that the U.S. is a democracy is a more modern conception. I believe that it mostly started with Woodrow Wilson, his interest in spreading democracy through the world, through globalism, and through, the League of Nations, a precursor to the UN that he championed. But Michael Knowles is right about what the founders said about democracy, and this is whether they opposed the Constitution or supported it. That generation of men believed that democracy was wrong-headed. Why? Because the Greeks had tried it. It was a failed experiment because it was majoritarian rule. It was the tyranny of the majority, where 2 wolves and a sheep voted on what was for dinner. That's just kind of an allegory. But if you got 50.1% of the populace to say, hey, all of the wealth from this segment of the populace should be confiscated and given to all the others, or we should wage war because of this 50.1 percentile, that was a backward policy. And here's what Madison had to say about it, in the Federalist Papers. Hence it is such democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or rights or property, and have in general been insured in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths.
In large part, I think it comes in because of Tocqueville's great book, Democracy in America,
Yes.
Best study of America ever. But even there, our regime is a mixed regime. Our regime has a strong democratic element. As it was initially instituted, it has an aristocratic element in the Senate, and it has a monarchical element in the president. So you even think today, of all the kings around the world, the president of the United States probably has more practical monarchical authority than, say, King Charles, right? Adrian Vermeule made this point the other day. I'm pretty sure the president of the United States is a more robust king than like the king of Norway or whatever. And so our regime, this was intentional, by the way.
That wasn't intentional. It was decided that there would be a singular monarch, and that on its own face was contentious in the Philadelphia Convention, because William Paterson's New Jersey plan called for executive authority to be divided between multiple individuals. But I think he's wrong to say that it was strictly monarchical, because Alexander Hamilton did champion a monarchical executive that had the power to essentially serve for life, be a hereditary but elected leader, have more of the British-oriented qualities ascribed to a monarch. But the Philadelphia Convention described the executive as someone with subdued power. He couldn't wage war on his own like the British monarch could. He couldn't appoint advisors himself. He had to have the advice and consent of the Senate. He couldn't levy taxes himself. That was a difference. In some ages of English history, that became more and more controversial as English history panned out. But it was designed to not be strictly monarchical, despite being a singular executive. So I think that there is some wrong there, but I think he's absolutely right that the current president is far more powerful than modern kings, and even the most powerful kings of, say, the 18th century. The current president wields that much power, especially when he can wage war and drop bombs on other countries with the drop of a finger, with a striking of a pen. That's insane. That would not be the conception that the founders desired. So whatever you think that makes you believe regarding the Constitution and its effectiveness today, that's another story.
And it's outlined as the ideal regime in the Summa Theologia, but it goes all the way back to Polybius, this notion that there's a cycle of regimes, because it's a fallen world, and so maybe you have a monarchy, but it's going to degrade over time, and it's going to become a tyranny. What's the difference between a monarchy and a tyranny? A monarchy is for the common good. Tyranny is for private interest. You can have an aristocracy, government by a small number of good people. That will degrade into an oligarchy. I think we've seen a lot of that in recent years. Common good versus private interest.
Yeah, I don't think private interest is a bad thing. Society is organized on the basis of individuality, and tyranny is not indicative of private interest. Private interest is a good thing. Tyranny is indicative of violating individual rights, plunging us into war, perverting the Constitution, setting up a dual-tiered legal system when those in power are protected and those who aren't are left behind. The fact that, there's massive amounts of corporate welfare, an extortion apparatus, an inflation apparatus in the central bank. allowing government to get away with things that are immoral, unconstitutional, and criminal that individuals couldn't get away with. That's tyranny. And monarchy is not for the common good.
You can have a democracy, and a democracy can be quite good. That the virtue of the early American Republic, that can degrade into a kind of mob rule where it's just people pulling for their own factions and their own private interests. And so you're going to have this cycle of revolutions that's going to go on. What the framers of the Constitution tried to do was escape that cycle by instituting a mixed regime, no matter what they called it, a republic if you can keep it, or a constitutional system or whatever. And it has held pretty well. It has been increasingly democratized, so it's probably leaned a little bit too much onto that side. Trump, I think, now is trying to restore, and this is part of a program that had been going on for decades, restore a little bit more executive authority to balance the whole thing out. But
yeah, balance it out with more executive authority, that I don't agree with. I do agree with what he said regarding, in some ways, our political system is a mixed regime. It has certain elements of, lots of different types of government. But balancing it out by expanding executive authority, all the last century has been an expansion of executive authority when it comes to independent war-making power, individual, presidential edicts that they call executive orders that have the power of law in some regards, to just organize society in a way where one person calls all the shots. And balancing it out involves more executive authority? I don't think so. I think Congress has been extremely deferential to both the president and the Supreme Court, the federal court system, throughout my lifetime, and certainly since the progressive era. So that part I don't agree with them on.
Regimes fall. That's the norm in world history. And so we are at a real risk of that if we don't correct some of the degradations in our own regime.
Yeah, I agree with that. We might not have the same prescription for fixing the degradations and fixing the violations, but I think it has been a growth of the bureaucratic state. That was something that was left out of this. They just didn't cover it. But the growth of individual bureaucracies and centers of power in Washington that call shots instead of the elected officials. You have the Israel lobby and the military-industrial complex and the banks and big pharma really owning our politicians. And we're supposed to be fine with the fact that we elect senators now directly, who are now less beholden to us and more beholden to national lobbies as a result. Don't even go back to their home states in many cases, but, once in 6 years to, pander to the voting base, then go back to Washington and vote in the direction of Benjamin Netanyahu. That's how things pan out right now. And, I think there are some merits to what he said regarding the mixed nature of the U.S. regime. The Senate was designed to be more aristocratic in nature, like the House of Lords in Britain, offset by another house of the legislature, the House of Representatives, that would be more democratic per se, but not democratic in the sense that those people would, do necessarily all the will of the people that they elected. That was the idea, but that hasn't really panned out. That it was supposed to be a portion based on state populations, as Madison called it. Madison originally drew up a plan where both houses of Congress would be apportioned by populace, and then the compromise, called the Connecticut Compromise, bifurcated it in the way that we have. But it's deferred most of its power to the executive. We see that in terms of the tariff power. That's controversial now because it's being fought out in the legal system, war-making power, the power to plunge the U.S. into debt without Congress's wherewithal. And Congress itself delegated much of its authority to the central bank in terms of controlling the finances. So this is an interesting discussion. I think there were some merits to it. I don't consider democracy plausible because it is majoritarian rule. There shouldn't be votes on our basic rights and whether we have those rights. Those rights should stand undisturbed regardless of whatever votes are carried out, let alone a debating whether I have the right to my own property or firearm, or have the right to not have my effects searched and seized by government. Those things can't be voted away. That doesn't moralize anything. Just having 50.1% vote to violate your rights does nothing to assure us that what's done is moral. What does assure us that something is moral is consent, and that's the case in regard to everything. That's why contracts will always overrule majority votes where minorities' rights are just completely violated. But I do want to hear from you. Let me know down below. Do you agree with Tucker on this? Do you agree with Michael Knowles on this? Where do you think they get it wrong regarding democracy? Please let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Tucker. Thanks for the conversation. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel. And in return, I'll give you access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.